Okay, let's move!
What do we have, Sergeant?
Just do it, son.
Got a bad feeling about this.
Got contact! Blast them! They're not coming!
Oh, this is local! There are too many,
Don't
Sarge!
even think about it, Marine. Take it!
Halo Combat Evolved is a game predominantly known for its action-packed gameplay and sci-fi setting. That's definitely an understatement, but for me the most memorable aspect of Halo's first chapter is the way elements of horror are woven into the overall experience. The horror elements in Halo Combat Evolved manifest mainly through its atmosphere, pacing, inspired sound and enemy concepts, and the unfolding mystery surrounding Halo itself. Although these elements are secondary to the game's action-oriented core, I believe they contribute significantly to the overall experience, creating moments of tension and unease that are fundamental to the game's lasting appeal. In this video, I'll unpack these horror elements and why they lend themselves to make Halo more than an ordinary sci-fi action game. One of the primary horror elements in Halo Combat Evolved is the profound sense of isolation owed largely to the campaign's pacing and atmospheric environments. We assume the role of Master Chief, a super soldier battling to uncover the mysteries of a massive ring world called Halo. The game begins with Master Chief and a small group of Marines stranded on a mysterious ring world after their ship, the Pillar of Autumn, is attacked by the Covenant. In the initial stages of the game, the environments are large, beautiful, yet quiet and eerie. Landscapes are dotted with abandoned structures filled with empty corridors that suggest something ominous is lurking just beyond view. This emptiness while traversing the ring world evokes a sense of loneliness, a key element in horror, where we are made to feel alone and vulnerable in unfamiliar and hostile environments. To lull us into a sense of security, Bungie makes a concentrated effort to pace the first half of the campaign to build up our confidence in core combat mechanics. Each mission provides us with new weapons and vehicles, all while supported by Cortana and Marine forces picked up along the way. By the midpoint of the campaign, we are expected to feel confident in our ability to fight the Covenant, having gathered expertise with Halo's combat toolkit on the way to taking Halo's control room. It is at the conclusion of this mission where the key conflict would expect to be resolved. If Halo is the gun pointed at the head of the universe, then humanity has won the trigger. However, as this is only the halfway point in the story, it is the next mission onwards where Halo's narrative takes a darker turn. All that power and confidence built up until this moment is abruptly stripped away, sending us and the Chief into real isolation. 343 Guilty Spark perfectly encapsulates why Halo is so memorable to me. This chapter in the game completely diminished my morale with its dark and horrific tone, an admirable feat considering the previous level armed us with the power of the Scorpion tank. This level's purpose is to strip away our confidence built up so far by introducing the Flood through a sequence of tension, dread, and panic. The palpable tension that builds as we navigate the swamp and enter the bloody facility amplifies Guilty Spark's isolating atmosphere. Shadowy figures stalk us from afar as we tread through the swamp. Groups of Covenant we encounter are leaderless and often terrified. Given that they've been the main adversary up until this point, our anxiety is heightened by the sight of a familiar enemy faced with something they fear. We realize that this is the first time in the game where we are truly alone. There are no Marines to fill the dead air with light banter, and no Cortana to offer witty remarks or a helpful waypoint. Deeper in the facility, we find a lone surviving Marine with his back against the wall in a manic state, firing at us with his pistol. The harrowing, desolate atmosphere emanating from the facility's blood-stained rooms and corridors builds a sense of dread as we approach that moment where Halo's iconic villains, the Flood, are finally introduced. It's no accident that Bungie maneuvers us into an enclosed space before revealing their hand. The entire level gradually confined the surrounding environment, reducing our comfort zone and limiting our breathing room until this pivotal moment. We are now fully isolated with no escape. We are trapped. After analyzing the scrambled video log of our fallen comrades, the Flood spring their trap, forcing us to shoot our way out in a desperate escape. From this moment, the escape from the facility is designed to be frantic and induce panic. Infection and combat forms swarm us from all directions, pushing our movement and combat abilities to the limit. The escape sequence has us scramble through the facility, the environment feeling like a maze in reverse, and it's very easy to get lost on the way out, ode to the repetitive level design. This probably wasn't intentional, but I think it does serve to challenge our composure while faced against this new enemy. One particularly nasty trick is how the elevator lifts up slightly on activation, giving a slight sense of hope that we'll ascend out the facility. Instead, it takes us down deeper into the nightmare, emphasized by the violent splatters of elite blood on the walls. At the bottom, we have to fight our way out against flood combat forms who are revealed to be competent with firearms as well. Fortunately, once we finally manage to escape, we are rewarded with some sorely missed marine company, though their lives are short-lived. Unfortunately, this marks the last time the Marines will assist us in the game. Let's listen in on their final moments.
Killed him.
By the conclusion of this level, the horror that once lurked in the shadows have now taken physical form, amplifying the sense of fear and isolation we feel on the ring. Despite the Sentinel's assistance during the subsequent mission in the library and our eventual reunion with Cortana for the final 3 missions, the feeling of vulnerability and isolation lingers, rooted in our unsettling experience within that facility. These feelings persist through to the very end of the game when the ring is destroyed, leaving a solitary Master Chief and Cortana suspended in the vast darkness of space. The inclusion of terrifying enemy concepts and visual designs, especially those involving the Flood, are designed to invoke fear through their grotesque body horror-like appearances. The bulging infection forms and the malformed combat forms of the Flood are unnerving, evoking feelings of revulsion and dread in the player. The grotesque and disturbing imagery of these forms, with their twisted, zombified forms of familiar figures, heightens the terror. In some ways, their visual design seems inspired to evoke the same feeling of repulsion as John Carpenter's infamous horror film, The Thing, which features a parasitic alien that also contorts and mutates the human form. The Flood's life cycle of claiming and assimilating its victims is deeply grim and unsettling. As suggested before, it consists of 2 stages, at least at the time of Combat Evolved. The first stage consists of pure infection forms that swarm together to overwhelm and assimilate a living or dead host. Their tentacles penetrate the victim's skin and attacks their nervous system, then mutates its DNA, resulting in their form gnarling internally and externally. This process of violation and transformation culminates in the second stage, the Flood combat form. If this pattern of infection and mutilation sounds familiar, you might be comparing this process to the iconic Xenomorph in the Alien franchise. The combat forms are more capable against armed enemies, feeling no pain or fear. Their ability to overwhelm the player as one massive horde mirrors the classic zombie apocalypse trope, where the quantity of enemies is just as terrifying as their appearance. They eliminate hostile threats without remorse and gather their bodies to be infected by the pure forms, and the cycle continues. This shift from straightforward alien combat against the Covenant to the unnerving swarm of the Flood challenges our sense of safety, amplifying the game's tension and fear factor. After all, the Flood are a relentless and revolting horde capable of consuming and mutating all life it encounters. This revulsion culminates in Halo's penultimate level, aptly named Keys. This level is partly designed to suggest what the Flood may become if they overwhelm important figures, systems, and structures in civilized society. The build-up to the eventual discovery is awfully sad as we communicate with a tortured Keys who is potentially undergoing Flood transformation, unlike one we've imagined before. We are horrifically subjected to his agony throughout the level, and there is intense pressure put on us to rescue him. Unfortunately, those efforts are proven futile when we are met with his twisted fate. We can imagine that this fusion of Keys and other nondescript victims represent the next stage of Flood evolution, a hive mind merged with the intellectual knowledge of its victims. This is a concept that Bungie would develop towards the Gravemind character in the following games. The reveal that Keys is a part of this hive is frightening, for a plague or infection is even more terrifying when it possesses and comprehends the protocols of its victims. This ugly mass and the violent efforts we take to prevent further catastrophe leaves a lasting level of disgust and unease, emphasizing the urgency to escape and eliminate this horrific threat before the final mission. The horror in Halo Combat Evolved is not just about physical form, but also about the psychological dread of the unknown. The mystery surrounding the ring world itself, the enigmatic forerunners who built it, and the deadly purpose it fulfills adds an element of cosmic horror to the game. Our journey takes us deeper into this mystery, and with each new discovery, the sense that we are uncovering something vast and incomprehensible intensifies. We realize that this is not only fighting for survival, but we are also uncovering the horrifying truth about the ring's purpose. It is a weapon designed to stop the Flood by wiping out their food supply. All sentient life in the galaxy. Us. This reveals the grim reality that our struggle against the Flood is part of a much larger and more existential conflict, where survival means participating in the genocide of the universe in order to save it. This realization is both a plot twist and a moment of horror that shapes the overall tone of the game. The nature of the Flood itself taps into deep, primal fears. They are not just alien invaders, but an unstoppable force that grows in strength the more they consume. The threat of the Flood is unlike that of the Covenant, who can be outsmarted or defeated through combat prowess and military strategy. The Flood are insidious, and their ability to transform fallen enemies into additional threats creates an ever-growing sense of dread. We are constantly aware that defeating one wave of Flood only means we are one step closer to facing the next and more dangerous wave. The cyclical nature of this threat, where each victory is quickly overshadowed by a new, more terrifying challenge, makes us feel as though we are trapped in an inescapable nightmare. We are not simply fighting an alien force, but are confronted with a violent infection that spreads relentlessly, representing themes of contagion, decay, and the breakdown of order. The psychological horror is further emphasized through Bungie's use of natural and supernatural symbols combined with eerie sound design. The UNSC and their technology are grounded in a reality that makes sense to us. Their vehicles are all named after Earth-based animals and insects, and appropriately produce sound that resemble conventional combat vehicles in real life. The same notion can be applied to their collection of weapons as well. A pistol sounds like a pistol, an assault rifle sounds like an assault rifle, and so on. By contrast, the Covenant are suitably otherworldly. All of their vehicles are named after a type of undead or spirit, and the soundscape associated with those vehicles help them reinforce this unnatural concept. The sound you might hear when they are nearby resembles the air subtly shifting around the vehicle's mesh while it hovers off the ground. They are dreadfully quiet, an effect that's particularly notable during our first encounter on the ring when two banshees silently approach after we crash land. While not invoking horror in the traditional sense, this approach sets us up for the more direct elements to come, which brings me back to the Flood again. The Flood produce horrifying, guttural sounds. Their disjointed movements and the bone-chilling noises they make when rushing towards us all create a sense of anxiety and dread. The sudden shrieks, scuttling noises, and the overwhelming crescendo of their approach increase the tension, causing us to constantly check our surroundings, unsure of when the next wave might strike. It is the twisted and malformed sounds of the natural world that make the Flood so terrifying. The soundscape in Halo is often silent and ambient, which is strange considering how iconic the soundtrack has become in pop culture. Perhaps that is what makes it so memorable, at least in respect to this title. Halo feels grand and epic when the iconic Halo motif introduces the beach assault and the silent cartographer. It comes in at the right time to make us feel heroic and brave when otherwise we might be afraid. By contrast, the quiet, ambient soundscape and lack of music in the dark swamps and corridors of 343 Guilty Spark set an eerie tone. The air is almost filled with complete silence that leaves room for our imagination to fill in the gaps, and not in a good way. While Halo Combat Evolved is largely celebrated for its groundbreaking mechanics and fast-paced combat, I feel it is the discussed horror elements that make its gameplay and narrative all the more memorable. Bungie crafting a sense of isolation through story pacing, complemented by inspired enemy and sound design that blend physical and psychological horror, create moments of genuine tension and fear that set Halo apart from other sci-fi shooters of its era. The horror elements in Halo are not only an effective contrast to the more traditional action elements, but also serve to deepen our immersion in the Halo universe, ensuring that the experience remains thrilling and unnerving. By weaving elements of horror into the core action gameplay, we remember Halo Combat Evolved as a landmark title in gaming. It demonstrates that a shooter can successfully explore the genre's capacity for fear while still offering an engaging and involving gameplay experience.